Hello? Hello? No, I expected it to be louder. How's everybody doing? Good, good, good. Welcome to, what is this, week 4? Right? Week 4 of the life of St. Paul. As you guys know, we are planting our very own St. Paul Church. And what did you all say, 12 days? Right? So for that, we thought it would be, the education team thought it would be a great idea to learn about who our patron saint is so we have a better understanding of why we decided to go with St. Paul. So can anybody tell me what the main verse for this series has been? I can't hear you guys. Imitate who? Imitate me? Imitate Siyum, right? Y'all gonna imitate me, y'all not gonna get very far, I'll tell you that much. No, St. Paul said imitate whom? Me. And who is the me as what? As I have imitated Christ, and that is 1 Corinthians 11, 1. Can anybody just tell me a brief rundown? First week we did intro. Second week we talked about what? Our brother Diakonati talked about what? Huh? Nebiu. You see, I failed. I was trying to see if y'all was paying attention. Was that right? What? Who did second week? Nebiu did. Yeah, so what was the second week of? Nebiu talked about zeal, right? St. Paul was very zealous. Whether he was doing good, whether he was doing bad, he was zealous. And then Diakonati talked about, you guys said it? Grace, and how that is a ridiculous thing, and we're going to get into a little bit of that later on. And then last week, our brother Kalab taught about humility. And today, I have been given the task to talk to you guys about trials and tribulations. So we're going to talk about what trials and tribulations mean. When we talk about trials and tribulations, we said, one, we're going to signify what not trials and tribulations, trials and temptations. Sorry. I've been through trials and tribulations. That's why the first thing that comes to mind is trials and tribulations. But trials and temptations, we're going to talk about one, what is the difference between the two? Two, how does St. Paul handle both? The third thing is, how does that relate in our daily lives? Everybody with me? And there's one thing I'm going to ask you guys, okay? So there was, we were at Bible study, and the couple of us that were there present would know. At any point today, the one thing I'm going to keep hitting on is that one phrase I want everybody to remember is God's work, don't stop. God's work, God's work, don't stop. God's work, don't stop. This side, say God's work. God's work. This side, don't stop. God's work, don't stop. Flip it. God's work, don't stop. Okay, all right, so we're going to hit that nail, or whatever the saying is. We're going to keep saying that a lot of times, because that is something that St. Paul never did. Every time he did something, you're always constantly reminded that God's work don't stop. So, I was supposed to ask you guys, again I gave it away. The difference between trials and temptations, right? When we talk about trials, these are outside factors that affect us. So these are things outside of our control, right? We're going to get into that. And temptations is the fleshly desires, the sins that we fight against on a daily basis, right? So trials is external. Temptation is internal, all right? So everybody's with me. So we're going to get started with that. We're going to start with trials. Now, St. Paul, the past 3-4 weeks, you guys have seen that he's been through it. Trials, we're going to start with trials. Trials meaning what? External stuff, right? And anything that he tried to do, especially after his the road to Damascus, he has been going through it. He has faced many trials, persecution, imprisonment. People have plotted against him. Even his own people have turned against him. He's received death threats and ultimately leading to his death, right? And these are things not of his own, but things other people are inflicting upon him, or the situations have inflicted upon him. So we're going to look at one story in specific where St. Paul, it's hard to understand like how crazy this guy was for Jesus, right? So when he was in Rome, he was in prison for 2 years, right? Because when he was in prison for 2 years, he was allowed to have guests to come over. He was writing his letters. But one thing that always happened was there was a soldier that was always chained onto him. And these soldiers would take shifts. They would take shifts, okay, your shift is over, next person comes in. And mind you, who's the prisoner in this situation? Who's the prisoner? St. Paul is the one that's the prisoner. But he used the chance every time there was a soldier in prison to him. He saw that's how much of a maniac he was for Christ. He was like, this is a great opportunity to teach the word of Christ. Imagine. Like, we're going to talk about the trials that we face, but imagine you're in prison. You're in prison not even for doing a crime. Mind you, and this was the time when he was in prison in Rome. This was in his later years. And he got arrested in Jerusalem, and they dragged him across the continent to Rome at his old age. After he got there, when he is being imprisoned against the Roman soldiers, the Roman guards, wherever they may be, he is teaching the word of Christ to them. And Alab touched upon it a little bit last week, to a point where he's converted a lot of the soldiers. That's how much trial, when he was facing trial, he did not care what situation he was in, and he continues to write the epistles. And one of the epistles he wrote was to the Philippines. I always get Philippians, yeah. Philippians. I always say Philippines. That's a different thing. Sorry, English is my second language, y'all, as y'all know. But when he's writing it, especially the first few chapters, you would not believe that this is a man in prison that's writing it. You would not believe, there's no way St. Paul's in prison when he's writing this. No way he's under arrest for 2 years, waiting trial when he's writing the letters. Because when he starts out, he even tells them, thank you for sending me money. Thank you for all that you've done for me. Because this is one of the churches that he established and was his second missions. He's so happy that, like, the tone, I'm imagining, I'm trying to put myself in a prison. I'm trying to imagine for wrongfully being in prison and writing to the letters, consoling people that are outside. That is, like, if I'm facing those trials, again, we're looking at external factors, right? These are things that he faced because other people inflicted this upon to him. And he's telling them, thank you for what you've done for me. They sent him money to kind of get him through his imprisonment. It's like, I've received your money. You guys are so wonderful. Bro, if I'm in prison, I'm like, y'all got to get me out. I need someone to come get me out. I am in prison wrongfully. But from the story you read, it almost sounds like St. Paul is the free one, and the soldiers that are there are the ones that are in prison. It's almost like he's the one that said, you have an 8-hour shift, you can't get away from me. You're gonna hear the word of God today. And just like that, he converted many, many soldiers. And that's so crazy for me to think about, because, like, the way I imagine St. Paul while he was imprisoned is like how we would imagine if you, for something like your favorite thing. For me, like, the thing I can think of is like, we're gonna lock you up and all you can do is watch basketball courtside with your favorite players. And I'm gonna be like, okay, lock me up. Or like, it's like locking up a kid in a candy store saying, you can't get out. You could only have all the candy that you want. That's how I imagine what St. Paul processed, how he thought about it. Because when he was going through it, he was happy. He was joyous. And if we go forward into the Philippians 1:12, he said, now I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. He said, as a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard to everyone else that I am chained for Christ. So he's telling them, I am not bounded by chains for the Romans. I am not bounded by chains for sins. I am locked up for Christ. He says that with joy. Mind you, like, he got dragged across continents. At his old age, I think the math may not be clear, but he was like in his early 60s or mid 60s when he got taken to Rome. At that age, that's the age now we retire. That's the age when we're cashing in our 401ks. But then at that age, he got dragged through different continents, and he's telling them, I'm locked up for Christ. He is happy about it. He said, I am in chains for Christ. And then it goes on to say, he said, for it has been granted, actually before I get there, if you keep reading the following, before you get to 29, he tells them, across the palace guard, across the imprisonment that he was in, the word of Christ is being taught. He says, some are doing it for the right reasons. Some, they're doing it because they want the envy. But I don't care. Why? The gospel is being spread. I don't care how it gets spread. I don't care who it comes from. But the gospel is being spread. He's saying this while he is in prison. And then later on it said, for it has been granted to you on behalf of Christ, not only to believe in him, but also to suffer for him. When I read this the first time, I was like, yeah, like, it makes sense. And then I reread it again. You reread it, you reread it. It's telling you, you have been granted what? Believing in him and what? What? Suffering. Granted suffering. Granted suffering. It was a little puzzling for me. Because that's like somebody said, I grant you this punch and knocks you out. I grant you a poverty and takes your money. I grant you discomfort and just makes you in the most uncomfortable possible. Like when you think of grant, you think of what? Gifts. Like even in government grants, people give you money, right? YOTC can use, guys, like a little bit of, if there's any grant writers out there, we can use some money for our grants. But when somebody said, I grant you this wish, it's almost like a genie, right? You're granted through whatever you want. But he said, in Christ, you are granted to believe in him, but also suffer. What is the verse of this series? Imitate me, right? Who is he imitating? Christ. Did Christ suffer while he was on earth? No? No, right? Nah. Did he suffer? That's the same thing that Paul is saying. And he's the only one to say, imitate me, because he's the only one that welcomed suffering. Because whether you put me in prison, whether you lock me up, whether you chain me up to Roman soldiers, God's work don't stop. That's what St. Paul was thinking about when he was going through trials and the outside trials. And in 2 Corinthians, he lists the different things that he's experienced. I've underlined a few. Say, 5 times I received the 40 lashes. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. There was danger from rivers, danger from bandits, danger from my fellow Jews, danger from Gentiles, danger from the country, danger at sea, danger from false believers. I have been labored, toiled, have gone out without sleep. I've been cold. I've been naked. He is telling you these are all the things I experienced. And then just to finish up, he said, beside everything else, he said, and the daily pressure from the church. Now I read this, I was like, this is a man that should be broken. This is a man that should not be writing epistles to different churches, like consoling other people, because he's been through too much. If he was to take a day off, I will understand. You have earned it. You've been through a lot. You can take a day, you can take a couple of days off. I wouldn't be mad at you. But you start thinking, like, what keeps him going? Right? Because I think of myself, at the smallest inconvenience, I'm done. There's times, like, I wanted to go to the gym. It's raining outside. I can't go to the gym today. That's indoors. I have a car that works, but because it's raining, I can't go. We tend to stop at the smallest inconveniences, but he says, imitate me. And like, you need to ask why. Like, why? What kept him going? Right? Under this 1,000,001 different circumstances where he was going through a lot of things, what kept him going? And the biggest thing for St. Paul was his happiness, his joy, his contentment was not in his circumstances. Our joy our happiness, our contentment, the source of that should not be our circumstances, it should be Christ. You see, the moment your joy becomes Christ, because that's never changing, right? Are you guys with me? That's never changing. No matter how much you try to change it, Christ will never change. Your circumstances, on the other hand, they're bound to change. And there's a lot of trials that we go through, right? I've listed a few. There's some trials that we face, losses of a loved one. We grieve. That's outside of our control, right? I know it's hard. I know it's a tough thing, but that's outside of our control. Anxiety, depression, mental illnesses, please, like things that are outside of our control. That is something that people experience. Political correctness. For today, that is something that is big. I was talking with one of the servants, like, especially with people that think, like, religion is dead, or you can't, like, God is dead. People that believe that, honestly, I used to be upset with them, right? I used to feel like, a bit like, bro, y'all don't know what y'all talking about. You're crazy. But then, like, for them, this is it. That's why you see a lot of movements right now, right? You see a lot of movements taking place, and on social media, you probably have seen people going out marching for different things, going to council meetings or town halls, screaming on the top of their lungs, angry, fighting, causing chaos. But those people, their joy is not with Christ. For them, this world is the end. This is the last. So we have got to feel bad for those people. We've got to pray for those people. If this wasn't for me, you best believe I'm doing everything I can to make sure I get the earthly wins as much as possible. So can we blame them? We should be praying for them. Natural disasters, financial burdens, and this is just to name a few. Everybody have your own trials. Trials are what? What factors? External, things that are outside of your control that you face. So you can fill in the blanks for your own thing, but these things, yes, they happen, they take place. Circumstances change. Sometimes you're good, sometimes you're bad. But if your happiness is tied with Christ, that stays constant. And that's what St. Paul was trying to get across to the people. Our joy, our contentment should be within Christ, because that's never changing. If your joy is circumstantial, then you're going to be going through a lot in your life. Especially as you're trying to figure out life. There's going to be a lot of things that you go through. Or just think for yourself, there's things that you've already been through. Things that should break you, things that should make sure, it's like, why did this keep happening to me? But if your joy is within Christ, the same way that St. Paul was, you can get through those things. And the early church fathers, there was a monk. He was often ill, right? He was often sick. And one year, he didn't get sick. And when this happened, you would think, like, if I didn't get sick the whole time after being sick, I would be like, oh, thank God, right? I'm good. Like, you have healed me. But what this monk did was he was very upset, and he cried, saying, the Lord has left me. He has not visited me. Believe it or not, it is through trials, just like St. Paul, guys, how you get to glorify God. Do you guys think St. Paul would be as big as he is now if he had it easy? If he just cruised wherever he went, people just sat down, listened to him? No. And then John Chrysostom, he has a great saying about what should happen when you're going through trials. And if you read the whole thing, he compares what you should be doing going through trials. Because we tend to say, what? When something happens or bad keeps happening to you, what do they say? Why God? Why me? By the way, we say that as, like, because we're perfect beings. Right? We say that because we have a moral high ground to stand on. Right? Nah. But it's our nature. We say, why me? Why does this keep happening to me? Why can't I have a good? And when John Chrysostom says this, he actually says, I just have a snippet of it, but he says, people, when they're going through trials, they tend to focus on the pain that it causes, but they forget the benefit. They forget the benefit. And he goes a step further saying, confess to the Lord, cry out loudly in prayer, cry out loudly glorifying God. He said, in this way, your suffering will be lightened because the devil will pull back from your thanksgiving and God's help will be by your side. And earlier in the very same sermon, he was teaching you about how the devil, right? If you blaspheme against God, when you're going through something, you say, why God? Why me? Why do you keep doing this to me? You turn against him, you turn your back, you get away from him. What the devil does is he will add more to it because like, oh, this is how I get you further away from God. And the analogy he gave was so beautiful. Like imagine you're sitting down. Who here has a dog? Dogs? Yeah? What kind of dog you got, man? A hound dog? Oh, okay. I'm not coming to your house. But imagine, or you guys know the nature of dogs. When you're sitting down and eating, what's the first thing a dog does? He comes, he just looks at you, right? He comes and looks at you to see if you like just throw him a bone or a piece of meat or some scraps, right? If you don't do anything, what do the dogs do? And I've dog sat my brother's dog. It works. If you don't do anything, what does the dog do? They're like, he's not giving me anything. I'm gonna go away. But let you give that dog just a crumb. Now that dog is gonna be expecting what? Every time there's going to be something that falls up. That's the same way the devil tricks us into getting away from God. The moment you turn your back against the gods and say, why? Just like that dog, that's the scrap, that's the crumb I was looking for. There's something here, guys. Then comes more trials. More things are thrown your way because the devil is saying, okay, this is what works. This is how I get him away from God. Because that's his ultimate goal, right? His ultimate goal, the devil is not for him to lure you towards him. His ultimate goal is for you to be away from God. He doesn't care if you're with him, away from him. As long as you're away from God, that is a good day in the office for the devil. Are you guys with me? So even in the toughest of times, we have got to push through. And some of the things that we experience, some of the trials that we, there's some things I call privileged trials. But I mean what that is like, it's a trial privilege. It's equivalent to a first world problem. We complain, like for example, at church, the AC is too hot. The AC is not working, the church is too hot. I got to drive 40 minutes to come to church. That's crazy. That's madness. St. Paul traveled, I think just in his first mission, 1,500 miles by foot. Because he said, no, nothing is going to stop me. I am bound. I am happy in Christ. There's no circumstance that's keeping me away because God's work, don't stop. There's somebody that attends here that kind of resembles a little bit of what St. Paul did. I live around the Wheaton area, if anybody knows where that is. It's about 30-minute drive. It's about 12 to 13 miles from here. But with traffic, DC traffic gets crazy. There was a kid that has walked from there to here a few times. No, I was like, yeah, you're wild. Like you have my number. I live on the way you can pick me up. I mean, I could have picked you up. But there's a kid that is amongst you guys right now that has walked from Wheaton, Maryland, all the way down here. Mind you, I told you guys 1,500 during St. Paul's time was like, oh, okay. But the moment I said he walked from Wheaton to D.C., you just hear gasps. There should be nothing that keeps us away from Christ. There should be no circumstances, just like St. Paul, external that is, because right now we're talking about trials, that keeps us away from Christ. And I know it's a tough thing to wrap your mind around. Because you're saying, like, I'm going through these things, right? How can it's hard for me to do so. But that's what Christianity is. As Christians, we should welcome suffering. We're trying to be like Christ. Christ did not have it easy. And did he back away at any point from any scenario where he was going to face suffering? He welcomed it. And every time that scenario, whatever it may be, was welcomed, God's name was glorified. And that's the ultimate goal. Are you guys with me? So that is a little bit about what trials we have faced. Now, we're going to get into temptations. Now, temptations is what? What kind of, is it external or internal or external? Internal. So these are the battles that we face on a day-to-day basis within ourselves. These are the sins. And when it comes to sins, it is falling short of God's glory. You're rebelling against God. Self-centeredness, and this is basically separation from God. That's what sin is. Everybody with me? Are you guys with me? Sin is those things that you listed above there. But if we had to put it in the simplest way, especially for this generation, for our generation, the main means of sin, or why we sin, is purely for instant gratification. I'm not saying there's not most of it. I'm just saying, just speaking generally, most of the sins that in our generation, people our age, they commit sin through instant gratification. And it's because we're at a time where we can't be content with the things that we have. We're always looking for that next fix of dopamine, you know? The thing that makes us happy. I'm a victim to it too. Like I'm saying this because I am also a victim. I've told a couple of the people in Bible study, there was a time one day, I had a long day at work. I was like, you know what, I'm going to go home, I'm going to just shower, like I'm going to order some food, I'm not even going to cook, you know? I'm going to just have like a light day. And then I was like, let me play some 2K. Started playing 2K. If anybody wants smoking 2K, y'all can get it whenever y'all want. Y'all just let me know. I got you, little man. Right? I was like, let me, why just get my mind off things, just do nothing, waste time, right? I'm playing 2K. And then, like, I didn't like what the announcers were saying. Like, I was like, this is mad. Like, I want to listen to music. I put on music. Mind you, like, it was just supposed to be a calm day. And then, so I'm listening to music on the speakers, I'm playing 2K, and then I look at the time, like, oh, said the Wizards game is about to start. So I put out my phone, right here to my left. So I'm playing 2K, I'm listening to music, and I'm watching the game. All three things at once. And I was like, I stopped myself, like, yo, like, see, what are you doing? Because I'm trying to relax. I'm trying to get my mind off things, right? But because the video game was not enough, I had to add something else to it. The music was not enough. I had to add something else to it. The game was, I had to like literally step back and say, I'm doing 3-4 things at once just to get that little joy of calmness. And now when you get deeper into temptation, that's when it really kicks in, because it's so, sin is so seductive, right? It seduces you into falling in. There was an experiment they did with, they put a snake in this cage, right? And they put a bird in a cage. And when the video first started, I watched the video, it's like a 3-minute video. When the bird first got put into the cage, the bird was panicking. I'm like, oh my God, I'm in a cage with a snake, and you see her just climbing off to the corner, just trying to fly out the crate, or the cage. The snake stood still. He didn't do anything. And then the bird Now she's no longer trying to escape. Okay, maybe I'm not in danger. Right? Maybe I'm okay. And you watch it in the video. She stops flapping her wings. She sits down. The snake hasn't done anything. And then slowly she starts getting closer. She feels safe. The snake would have gotten me by now, surely. She gets closer, closer, until she was within, and in his line of vision, boom, strikes. That's how sin lures you in. It makes you think you're okay until it's too late. It makes you think you're fine until you see how far you've deviated from the first time you've done it. That's what sin does to you. Think of the first time you sinned. And I think I've told the story before. The first time I stole $20. I was in 6th grade. And this is pre-inflation, so $20 was a lot back then. So I'm thinking of what I'm going to do with the $20. I took it from my sister. My sister came up to me. She said, hey, where's my $20? I don't know. Beats me. I stole, and she escalated it to my parents. Now, parents were involved. I thought it was like $20. I did not think parents were going to get involved. So I panicked. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I have the $20. I was like, I didn't want to admit that I took the $20. So what I did was, and mind you, this was a time when I was still in middle school, so this was when phone cards were still a thing. I went across the street, bought phone cards, $20 worth of phone cards. I bought a $5 card for my mom, a $5 card to call for my dad. How much is that for my mathematicians? $10, right? And then how much was I left with? $10. And then, okay, well, I have 2 older sisters. Both of them should get 2 cards each. $4, $4. How much is that? 8. And did? So if I get 2, and Billy has the sign. So I got $2 each for my sisters, $2 each for my infant, so $4 for both of them. I don't know. So that's $8. How much was I left with? 2. I gotta look out for my little brother, because he gotta call people too. And then, boom, what does that add up to? $20 even. I was like, guys, I come bearing gifts. This was at the family dinner. I got my dad, boom, $5. My mom, boom, $5. My sisters, $2 guards, $2. My brother. And then, mind you, my parents know, there's $20 missing. It's just basic arithmetic. It's like, okay, 5 plus 5 is 10. And then they're like, where'd you get the money? I was like, I had not thought this far ahead. That's the first time I saw. That's how innocent my mind was. I would have gotten busted if this was an actual crime. Because the first time you do it, you feel guilty, you feel unclean, but then it becomes normal to you. It becomes easier to you. It becomes almost second nature. Right? Because sin is so seductive. To a point you don't even know you've been got until it's too late. We're updating the software? I bet. But what does St. Paul tell us about facing sin? St. Paul treats facing temptations literally as if you were going to war. Because it is a battle. There's no ifs and buts about it. It is a constant battle, and you have got to be ready. And St. Paul tells us, be strong in the Lord and his mighty power. Put the full armor of God. He doesn't just say armor. The key word full, meaning you need to guard everything. Because where there is no armor is that's where the devil gets you. He tells you, our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against authorities, against power in the dark world, against spiritual forces and of evil in the heavenly realms. These are the things that we're battling, people. And it is a battle. We have got to be ready for war. And he literally tells you, put on your body armor. And what is our body armor? He says, you may be, therefore put on a full body armor of God, that the day evil comes, you may be able to stand on the ground after you've done everything to stand. And then he tells you, in addition, take the shield of faith, right, which extinguishes the flaming arrows of evil. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit. You see, when you get ready for battle, you're not just playing defense, right? If you're going to war, you're trying to kill your opponents, get rid of them, right? Or am I crazy? Right? You're gonna attack too, no? Yes. But it says the one thing, everything else is an armor. Everything else he's given you is the armor. But what is the sword? It's the Spirit. It's the Holy Spirit. That is your armor. That is one of the reasons why Christ came down. And then when the disciples ask him, oh, what are you going to do when you leave us? Oh, I'm leaving you with the Holy Spirit. Don't worry. That is our sword. That's how we battle evil. That is how we battle temptations. Now this, Romans 7, like reading this sometimes, and I'm not even going to lie to you guys, it's hard for me. It makes me a little bit emotional, because when I read this, I'm like, there's no way St. Paul is writing that. Not the great St. Paul. What does he say? He said, I do not do what I don't understand what I do. For I want to do what I do not do, but what I hate to do. I want to stop sinning. I don't want to sin, but yet it is the same thing that I do on a daily basis. He continues to say, and if I do what I don't want to do, I agree that the law is good. As it is, there's no longer myself and what I do, but it's the sin living within me. For I know that good itself does not dwell in me, that is my sinful nature. For I have the desire to do what's good, but I cannot carry it out. Who does that relate to in here? I'm sure that most of you. So I want to be good so bad. I want to do the good things, but I can't because of my sinful nature. And who's writing this? The great St. Paul. See, just like us, St. Paul also faced temptation. But he understood it's not him, it's the sinful nature that we have, and it clings on to the flesh, right? Because it can't touch the Spirit. It clings onto the flesh to a point it weakens it, and then it takes over the Spirit. Are you guys with me? But it is in these times where we've got to battle. And earlier I said instant gratification, right? You really want gratification? Battle that sin that you're facing. Face it head on and see at least one time, if you come out on top, how great that feels. Because think about it, every time you sinned, after the instant gratification is over, it's just, I can't believe I did that. And because it's temporary. You feel disgusted, it's like you overate. You know, when you keep eating after you're hungry, and you keep eating because the food is good, after that you're like, why did I eat so much? This is so disgusting. Like I don't even feel well right now. I don't even want to enjoy the food. That's what sin does to you. After you get that little moment of instant gratification. But see how you feel. You battle that sin. You tell yourself, God's work don't stop. Right? You battle whatever sin it may be that you're experiencing. Everybody has their own desires that they have. Let you come out at once on top. And how great you feel. And that gratification, I guarantee you, will last a lot longer than instant gratification you would have gotten had you committed that sin. Had you fell to that temptation. Are you guys with me? In 1 Corinthians 10:13, St. Paul writes, no temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear, but you are tempted, he will also provide a way so you could endure it. He's telling you he will never give you a temptation that you can't bear. And I don't want anybody to get confused by this. When we're saying this, we're assuming that we're also trying our best. It's not that, I'm going to sin because this is a sin that there's not a sin that can outlast me or whatever. No, you're doing your best. God will not give you a sin that you cannot outperform. Are you guys with me? So the next thing is ways we can combat temptations, right? Ways we can combat temptation is, like St. Paul did, turn to God. You turn to God. That is like, if you've never ever learned anything in the church, is just turn to God. Like, if you want to sum up the church, is like, it's the two things. Make sure everything that you do is for Christ, so your contentment is in Christ, and turn to God. There's nothing that God would not provide for you. And the first couple of weeks, right, Diakon Nati taught about grace. It's this ridiculous thing that we don't deserve. And sometimes we treat it as if it was transactional, right? It's like we do something good, and then what? God gives us grace. No, even in temptation, God, I am struggling with this sin, help me. That's what St. Paul was saying in the previous verse. It's like, I want to do good. I know what is good and I want to do it, but I keep falling down. Turn to God. I'll say give alone time to God. And the key word here is alone time to God. Because believe it or not, when you're alone and just that's when sin tends to happen, right? That's when intrusive thoughts start flowing in. That's when those texts are like, let me hit up, see what she's up to. Let me hit up to see what he's up to. Or let me see what people are on about, trying to see whatever. When you have time by yourself, you're just sitting down. But you give that time to God, now you see you're kind of killing two birds with one stone. And it almost blocks out the noise, the outside noise. When it's just you and God. Alone time with God is really important. And I have these two pictures of water because think about chaotic waters. Think about the water at the bottom, right? You're trying to hear God's voice. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to say, God, help me. I need you to show me something. I want to hear something from you to help me get through this temptation. If you're surrounded with sin, then the chaotic waters, right? Like, think about you pick up a pebble, right? And you lob it up and you throw it into the you have a very big net. Sure. It's been giving me a thing. I love my net at home. It says, yeah. But like, think about the chaotic waters, right? You have the pebble, you throw it up, right? What's going to happen? Are you going to see where that pebble landed? No. Because the water is all mushy, whatever, moving around. That little itty bitty pebble, you're not going to see it. But think about it, like close your eyes, it's nighttime, the water is calm. You throw a little pebble. One, you're going to hear that little sound, right? The little, I don't know. Yeah, y'all know the sound I'm trying to make. Yeah, they're doing it over there. You're going to hear that sound, but not only that, you're going to see the ripples, right? It lands, and then it starts to vibrate all the way out until it starts to fade away. That is what quiet time with God is like. Because the smallest whispers, you can hear it. But if you're surrounded with sin, you're surrounded with chaos, how are you going to hear that voice? Even for St. Paul, he was on his way to Damascus, and he needed a bright light to blind him for him to hear the word. It was just him and God in that moment. Are you guys with me? And we kept saying, what was the phrase that we kept saying? God's work? God's work? Yeah, so when I was saying that, it does not only apply to the work that we do for God, but also for the work that God in us. It's not something that stops. God is not going to be like, okay, he's good. No, as long as we keep coming to him, he's going to be there. And another means of combating is prayer, fasting. You guys have done this many, many times. But one thing that we can at least try to do is service as well. Service, it takes your time away from sin, to simplify it. The time you could be sitting down sinning, If you're in service, that is time dedicated for God, so you're away from service. There's been, for YLTC, there's been days where we literally consecutively, with the same group of people, on different teams, we get on a meeting. I was like, okay, have a good one, everyone. Boom. Hop on the next meeting with somebody else, like, all right, let's do prayer again. Boom. The next meeting, let's like, that time, if it was free, if it was not dedicated for God, it's time that we could have potentially used it for sin. So I urge everybody here, especially with the planting of the new church, we need a lot of service. Everybody here is young. We have that youth energy. Let's put it to use. Because that youth energy, this is the age of fire, right? Fire burns. It's just a matter of what is going to burn for God or what is going to burn through sin. And then the final thing is, for anything that you might have been going through or whatever things that you might have experienced, just start today. Say today is the day that I start. There's a Chinese proverb that says, the best time to plant a tree is 25 years ago. But the best one is now. You can't go back. I hate to break it to you. There's nothing you can do. Scientists have been trying to go back in time for so long, but they can only make movies out of them. There's nothing that you can do to go back. St. Paul, he didn't go back. He couldn't go back. And St. Paul he was persecuting Christians. That was his title. St. Paul had a LinkedIn say, Saul, persecutor of Christians. And then his resume would be very long. Recruiters will be reaching out to him on a daily. Right? But he did not look back. Matter of fact, what is it? And was it 2 Corinthians, or when he was writing to Timothy, he thanks God for choosing him. Because he's saying that because he chose me, he showed that even people like me can do God's work. Because God's work don't stop. And in Luke 17, chapter 17, 32, Christ says, remember Lot's wife. What happened to Lot's wife? Huh? Yeah, she was a little salty, right? Yes, I am that corny, and there will be more. But no, she turned into a pillar of salt. But why? So the angel was trying to save them from where? Sodom and Gomorrah, right? He was trying to save them from Sodom and Gomorrah, and they were given, don't look back. Whatever you do, do not look back. The angel was trying to save them from sin, from unholy, unmoral things that was happening in Sodom and Gomorrah, right? He said, don't look back. When you look back, you become stuck. Just like Lot's wife. That's why Christ says, remember Lot's wife. The same way for us, we can't look back. Because the moment we look back, we are stuck. That is the past. Everything that we're trying to change, it is the past. We cannot look back because what did she turn to? Not salt, but what? A pillar of salt. It is something that is still. You are stuck there. As long as you keep looking back, you will be stuck in the place that you're supposed to be saved from. The angel was trying to save her from Sodom and Gomorrah. He was trying to say, I'm here to save you. Don't look back. And because she looked back, she was stuck there. Are you guys with me? And even furthermore, with the opening of Spot Church, St. Paul Ethiopian Orthodox Hawaii Church, we're no longer looking back. The Ethiopian Orthodox Hawaii Church has had some hints about how it treats its youth, how unwelcoming it is for the youth. Whether you grow out your hair, whether you wear ripped jeans, whether you have tattoos, you're looked upon. No. Just like Christ said, remember Lot's wife, we're not looking back. That's the past. But more importantly, when it comes to trials and temptations, for trials, make sure, what was the first thing? That our joy, our contentment is within whom? Christ. And for temptations, the same thing. whenever you're facing it, make sure that you go through it with Christ. There was a video that I saw, like I think it was on Instagram or something. He said, I tried to fight the devil one-on-one. He said, oh, he had me beat. Like he had his ways with me. They're like, he had my soul. It was like a podcast, a snippet of a podcast. He said, it's only through Christ that I was saved. So don't think you can do it all by yourself. Any temptation you may face, one, remember that it is something that you will endure. God will not give you anything you can't endure. But the thing is, you have got to do your part as well. You have got to turn to him. And I pray to all of my brothers and sisters that we get through any trials that await us, or we're going through right now, and we defeat all the temptations that lie ahead. وصباح لك زابر.